Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bowman, and this is the Opera Glasses podcast. Today we are talking about digital media. I have Stephen Bell here, who works as a director of photography and lead UX UI designer for the media company Coffee Shop Film and Creative. He is a classically trained operatic tenor and a member of the Canadian Opera Company. He holds a Masters and Bachelor of Music from the University of British Columbia and was a member of the Calgary Opera Young Artist Program. He says, filmmaking is a lifelong journey, and I love learning and challenging myself to explore new filmmaking and editing techniques. To create something that inspires or moves a viewer is an absolute high. So let's talk to Stephen. Welcome to the Opera Glasses podcast. So tell me about your pathway to where you are today with Coffee Shop Creative.
It's kind of a fun, long road, but I started obviously in opera as an opera singer. My studies at UBC then took me as a young artist to Calgary Opera for Calgary Opera's Young Artist Program. Sang a bit in Europe, and then went to Toronto, where I sang both as a soloist with some companies in Eastern Canada, and then also in the chorus for the past 17 years. And then from that idea of working with singers and all that sort of idea in the arts, I created a company called Coffee Shop Creative originally that made websites and web design presences for singers and for directors and people in the arts, and that grew into video and then film. And so now we offer both film and promotional materials and websites and online branding and marketing materials.
So as a budding opera singer, were you also doing photography on the side and videography and that kind of thing? And then it turned...
Yeah, I mean, videography was always a love of mine, working with video and obviously cameras at school. I worked actually as a digital assistant at UBC doing work with the faculty in the computer side of things mostly, but then we sort of transitioned a bit towards video when I was at school. So those kind of skills working in video and dabbling my feet into the original versions of Adobe Premiere, that gave me a bit of a foundation that I've used today extensively with most of my projects, especially in video and in promotional materials and films and such.
What's your biggest inspiration behind your work? What's driving you?
Biggest inspiration behind my work? Wow. I think the need to tell everyone's story in the most cinematic way. Cinematic in loose terms, to make everything highly, high quality video and high quality presentation, because we're surrounded by so much media nowadays, especially with Netflix and Crave and Amazon and everything else, that the level of quality we expect is so high. And even on social media, the same thing too, like looking at reels on your phones and TikToks. They've exploded just from like grabbing your phone and shooting to having almost like dedicated production companies just to create media. So for me to be inspired by it, I would say that I am driven towards creating high quality visuals, narratives, a story that makes sense, and offering clients the ability of showcasing, any particular branding, event, promotion, show, film in the highest possible way, so that when their clientele or their followers view it, they're like, wow, we didn't expect this, in a sense, to this kind of level. So, and then to make it engaging and make people want to, learn more and see more.
The pandemic obviously really fast forwarded things in the opera industry in this regard. Many companies were very late to the game with their use of digital media and the importance and also the funding that went into that kind of work. So during the pandemic, were you working a lot more? What was your experience?
I mean, the pandemic, in a strange way for me, was probably the busiest I've ever been, because immediately we were forced to look at the world in a digital way. So in my position, I already had coffee shops set up as my, I worked with the COC, obviously, but I did extensive work in film and web before the pandemic hit. So I just basically transitioned and leaned heavily into my company, which was huge, because we were able to, we weren't struggling to find a path. We were able to offer the solution immediately based on the experience we already had. So we started to reach out to companies, but then we started to also get companies just reaching out to us immediately, asking for help with their online presentation, website growth, video growth, and then transitioning a bit into film, which is where things really took off to me, is to be able to tell stories, not just the promotional side of things and what a company does, but allowing them to create a film, allowing them to create music videos, allowing them to create narratives, documentaries, that sort of thing. And it became like a passion of mine to be able to show every company in a very unique way. So for 2020 and 2021, 2022, and now, I mean, we're still theoretically in the pandemic, the idea of still making video content as a forefront feature for companies is what we do regularly every day.
Yeah, it's really important to have a really strong narrative and to have a professional put it together, especially with everything that is online now. Like you say, people are scrolling through reels and, they don't quite understand what makes them stop and really have a look or click on that link or, experience that narrative in a fuller sense, like when they click through and then they end up on the website and they end up buying a ticket and all the things. But it takes a huge amount of work to be successful in that regard. So it's sort of your work is sort of the secret sauce, I would say.
I think it's just important that companies understand the need for that. And I saw in the pandemic the immediate response that companies got when they did this. And it was something that, like, just even looking on social media to see a response to a post or a video or Reels or TikTok, that kind of stuff, even before the idea of a big production that they were doing, was amazing because they were gaining audience outside of their niche. They were gaining viewership that would, as the algorithms go on all these platforms, and also in even just the promotional side of branding traditionally, you start to get more eyes into that field, which is what every company needs, right? So when they started to look into that, the response that I got back, even just in emails from companies and directors and such, was like, wow, we had no idea, the reach you can get by committing, a certain portion of their programming towards it.
So with all of this in mind, with everything we've learned in the pandemic, and the success of these, the use of video during the pandemic, and now we're back on stage, live audiences, do you feel like the digital path has sort of slowed down? What are your thoughts on the future of opera now?
Well, that's my soapbox topic that I always love to get on top of and talk about now, because I think, not just for myself as a media company here, our studio here at the coffee shop, but also for the media companies across the country that we have found that we've worked with during the pandemic and post-pandemic and everything else. There are so many different media companies that companies can work with to create media and everything else. So I think now that we've returned to stage, it's so vitally important that the lessons that we've learned, as well as the information that we've gained and metrics and audiences we've grown from working in digital, need to also still be a part of seasons. So what I mean by that is that moving forward, companies should obviously focus efforts on being on stage, but to have at least one part of their season being a digital offering, because this enables multiple things. Number one, enables for interactions and communications and partnerships and collaborations with media companies in different cities that they can work with to create a promotional material, to create a film, to create an online show that grows that network, but also to make sure that their audience is not just in their city. So let's just pick a city, for example, of, let's say, Toronto. And we have our dedicated base of subscribers and dedicated base of viewership, but also, it's a big city and there's many people who like to see what's going on in the arts. And therefore having a digital production also grows that audience too, or in BC or in Alberta, everything else. So I think that companies need to still offer the ability of showcasing one piece a year. There's an interest in it from the artists. There's obviously an interest from it in the audience point of view. And so, the artists also learn how to, work in film, how to work in the idea of creating video production by bringing in a team to help work with the company to create said possible production. you start to open up so many different doors that, allow for artist growth and company growth. And I think that moving forward, I would hope, and my desire for companies, not just in Canada, but in the States and also in Europe, is that they still adhere to this. They still work with media companies all over the world to create amazing digital content, because it not only is it just for YouTube and Reels and TikToks and all that kind of stuff, but it's also, if you create a good production with a good budget and it's engaging, you can put that on Amazon. You can try to put on Crave or on Netflix or everything else, because that also gains revenue for a company if they get picked up by said platform or production company, everything else. There are so many unique ways that open opera to what traditional film does. And I think the interest can be there, not just also with the artists that do it and the companies, but think about maybe bringing in an actor who might love singing or might love music or orchestral, and you bring them in, and all of a sudden, all of their following, which is a lot more than most opera singers that come in to see this. And so maybe that audience of 200 to 300,000 followers that they have all of a sudden is like, oh, what's opera? This is amazing because I see this actor now working with this company in this light. So I would hope that that potentially grows. I know many companies worked obviously with government grants to create projects, but maybe production companies and grants could allow for this growth to happen in the future. I mean, that would be very exciting to see a digital offering for each company and what it could be.
I definitely agree. And it drives tourism too. I mean, when people see things that are exciting, they want to go there, they want to experience it.
Yes, it does, because this is huge. If you see a production shot in Montreal, right? And so it's a beautiful production in Montreal. It's a beautiful city. That gains more interest in visiting Montreal, to visit said opera company, to visit the city and understand the culture and the arts behind it, and the music and the food and the people and everything else. There's so much opportunity of showcasing that, because when you watch a series or a movie, one of the first things I love to see is like, where is this being set? Like, have I been there? Like Angie, my wife, and I love to go sometimes to see locations of where films are shot if we're traveling, because it's like a part of a film that we've seen that is exciting to know that this took place here. So I think that's another way of showcasing the area of where the opera film, in a sense, could be shot.
Yeah, you talk about collaborating with a mainstream actor in order to piggyback on their followers. And in the same way, we can collaborate with our cities and use spaces that are distinctly Toronto or distinctly Kingston or wherever people are, and can set these film projects in, and we can all benefit from it. So I feel like there's
Absolutely.
Collaboration is a continuous theme in my life, and has been a theme of Opera Canada in my editor letters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge thing, and that's something I didn't really think about too much, is the idea of tourism and the need to experience a culture in a city, in a place, that's brought about by video and by film. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, it's driving our cultural identity. I feel like there are several layers of funding here that we're uncovering in our conversation here.
100%, because you're showcasing the rich diversity of a country and rich diversity of people by doing this, and that makes complete sense to really celebrate what we have and what other countries have too.
I think you worked on Messiah Complex, the Against the Grain, very successful film that was done, also a pandemic-related project. And that project also very much highlights Canada, the scope of Canada and its culture, people, and the places.
Yeah, I think that was something that not only from the cultural aspect of working on the film, but as we know, we were all in different provinces, and there's different film teams that all worked and collaborated on that project. And I think it was wonderful to really interact and engage and network and showcase and share and celebrate also all the different film teams and the behind the scenes teams too that worked on the film. So for example, working with up in Iqaluit or in the Northwest Territories, or working in Newfoundland, all these incredibly talented groups of creators and filmmakers and film teams and media houses, they all love doing this. And they all loved working on projects that maybe they didn't have a chance to work on in the opera or classical realm before. And I think it's very exciting to see that interest was there, and then the viewership that grew from that. I know that certain cities also really engaged in the same way too. Like I know POV had a great video series that they did. Chicago Lyric down in the States also had a really successful engagement with their audiences. You know, in Europe, in France, and Germany, when they also worked on their digital films and side of things, there was a great response, and it's exciting to see what can be created with just an idea.
And pre-pandemic, the Met, when they started their HD series, has been highly successful across the world. So I think that we see the value in both the film and also the difference between the film and the in-person experience too. So respecting both and complementing one another. So
it's real.
To think that we're not into the live performance, because it's certainly key to go and see opera live.
I mean, the Met was huge. The Met opened up the door for film for many companies. I found, way before the pandemic, the idea of going to a movie theater to celebrate what's happening on stage in such a beautiful visual way. I mean, that should still be done, obviously. I mean, that's something that most companies have now invested in, is the idea of video production in the house. So, if you even offer just that alone of a production that's done and streamed or put onto a medium such as not just YouTube and Vimeo, but maybe an Amazon, Netflix, Crave, etc. That's a very quick way of being able to utilize the tools that are at the theater and the staff that works there. And then in tandem working out with potentially an actual film or a scripted production, yeah.
My favorite thing about those Met HD in cinema productions is the intermission interviews.
Yes. Yeah.
They do those interviews, and I feel like intermissions could be really fun if they projected in every theater an interview backstage with the star singer or a set designer or something. If they had a couple of these interviews that were projected onto the curtain even.
That's an amazing idea, like using that in the production so that people who are sitting in the audience maybe don't go to the auditorium or come back. They can get the experience backstage, or having as in film we call BTS, so a behind the scenes style videographer, photographer who maybe has a live stream to their camera that can stream onto the curtain. Yeah, that's a great idea of I'm back here with even just not even the talent, but maybe somebody who's working in production or a stagehand or a technician, and showcase what they're doing, because everyone loves to see that. I mean, you have tours that go into these amazing theaters on the downtime between productions. There are people who walk around to experience that. So that is such an engaging medium. And then, maybe you take that content that you had during the show on the, on the curtain and put that online too, so that you have also that, the content lives and it can be utilized in multiple ways, because that's a huge thing that I always like to, promote to prospective clients is not only can your medium be used for the said direction of what you wanted it for, but those assets can be used in so many different ways. You can take video and you can put it into vertical format, horizontal format. You can do it in presentations at events. You can do it at promotional clips. You can do it for investor pitches, all that sort of stuff. So that's another way of showcasing, just holding the camera and getting the shots, one thing, but then thinking of where that can go is an exciting possibility.
I want to shift our conversation a little bit to individual artists. I know a lot of, up-and-coming artists, younger artists, struggle with figuring out how to manage their image and their social feeds and all of the rest. I'm wondering, what do you recommend for young artists who don't necessarily have the budget to hire someone like you? What are maybe 3 things you would recommend to a young artist?
3 things I'd recommend to a young artist are to, number 1, explore what inspires them with doing video or recording and whatever else, and understanding the idea of what they really want to create. That's number 1. And number 2 is you don't have to hire a team like myself. You don't have to get an expensive 4K or 6K camera, because to be honest, most of us have these, and these phones can shoot in so many amazing ways that, obviously we just take them out of our pocket and we hit video or hit, record and away we go. But underneath the hood, if you go into the settings of this, there's ways of turning on, everything from like 4K video in most cases on iPhones and Google phones and everything else. You can get yourself a simple stand for not too much money. You can invest a little bit in the microphone. But then, the idea of then learning the software, you can make yourself the product if you, have the interest and desire to do so. So, there's lots of things you can do, as we all learned in the pandemic because we had to. I think artists can really, be inspired by that. But in many cases, most artists I know all use Instagram and TikTok and everything else like YouTube or Facebook or whatever else to showcase what they do. So, there's many online things that are, budget friendly that you can do to help promote yourself in that first step. Even website builders, if you want to go and create a Squarespace site, they're not, they're expensive, but they're not out of the range of most artists' expenses. So there's lots of ways of being able to engage in that first. And then be inspired by what your colleagues are doing, because you find there's so many artists that are out there who are doing it already. So if you like a certain style that you see, try to incorporate that into your own, promotional material and development in your portfolio.
As a past publicist, I would always say to young artists, never post for the sake of posting.
Yes.
Always know what you're posting for. So, yeah. And, because people feel so much pressure to post all the time. And I think that consistency is key. And that doesn't mean that you have to do it 3 times a week, but that just means if you're going to do it, if you're not sure that you have enough to do it more than once a week, then only do it once a week, and just
too, like making sure your content is uniquely you. You only need to make sure that you post content that you're inspired to post, because then the inspired viewership comes back to you. Obviously there's algorithms and all the fun stuff that goes along with posting and certain directed posting and hashtags and linked accounts and I guess the number of posts too. But you're right. You don't have to post all the time and post content that, is engaging, that you think you are inspired by, because if you do that, then your audience will be inspired too.
All good advice.
It's just something that I think we have to be inspired as creators, especially those who work in media. But singers nowadays, it's easy to get, discouraged because there's so much out there. But in the second side of things, we turn those around. What's so much out there is also interested in learning and seeing what's new. So there's a lot of the ability of being able to put, uniquely engaging content out there that is celebrated and people want to see it. They want to see not just the finished product, but they want to see the road to get to that finished product. So that BTS idea again is something that's so important. I think that people want to be brought into that process of rehearsing and creating and like the building blocks of what you're doing. Because that's the most engaging, I think personally, when I see, artists and what they do and the travel and the behind the scenes, even before so of that final presentation on stage.
Definitely. It's definitely a vehicle to get to know an artist and really understand their essence and who they are when they're performing. So you'll be on faculty in Manitoba Opera's 2023 Digital Emerging Artists Program, and you've been on faculty with them for 3
for 3 seasons now. Yeah, I work with the team. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that program.
So it's a fantastic program that's based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I've had the pleasure of working with Scott Miller, who's the director of the program, and his team in creating the packages for both digital design, web design tutorials, videography tutorials, social branding tutorials, and essentially information instructional workshops and masterclasses for the artists to develop their own portfolio. And aside from that, also for the artists who are based in Toronto, shooting the video for them and the editing for their music video presentation and their media presentation that they were doing in the program. And it's a wonderful program with an amazing faculty that we're working with. And it's a unique program that is not just geared towards the performance development of a singer, but also the whole, portfolio package for that artist. So they get the skills both vocally as well as digitally. It's something that's often not taught in schools. The idea of branding yourself as a singer and the design aspect of things and the media side of things. Because obviously the fundamental skills have to be learned for singing and for acting and being on stage. But I think this program is so unique in the fact that it celebrates the portfolio and the promotional media side of the very important part of being a singer nowadays.
And do you do this in person, or you do this on Zoom, or how do you do this? How does the program operate?
So the program currently operates online, so on Zoom and online workshops. And then for those artists who are in Toronto, obviously I work with them because it's artists from all across the country. When it comes to the program, especially now, you're able to work and collaborate, that we all do now online, with artists from all across the country, and also guest workshops essentially online too. So it's really a very efficient and fast way of engaging and teaching fundamentals of media and growth behind that portfolio.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's so important. We all know that artists are or have to be entrepreneurs now, and with all of the digital marketing and media out there, they also have to learn these video skills, and really the narration of who they are is key to.
Well, it's fascinating. You see now, I'm looking online with the project overview that is being shown to the singers of what to expect, and they're offering the ability now, which I already know, but the idea of working with video post-production in Adobe Premiere Pro, which is an industry-leading tool in creating video and is something I use every minute of every day. And they're giving this to the artists now to be able to work in this. So they give the ability of not only learning how to shoot this and working with a creative team, but then the skills that are necessary to cut this and create this. Because, there's two ways of video. There's the portfolio style audition video package that you have, the traditional camera setup and the singer sings, etc., sent off to, companies for audition purposes. But then there's also the narrative side of promotional material for, a music video or for something else or more of a creative project. And to have the ability of learning that, it saves so much time. You're working with a team that can directly answer questions that you might have on, timeline setup, on color grading, on sound editing, on ideas for cuts and transitions, and any kind of rendering and exporting and all the nitty gritty of video production. And I think that's a huge skill that you pay a lot of money for to learn if you go to film school or whatever else. But you're getting this as part, in addition to working with an incredible faculty, Tracy Dahl and Monica Huseman, Marion Newman, and John Tessier. You also get the skills to do digital as well, and that's I haven't seen that elsewhere in the country. So yeah, definitely excited.
Yeah. I feel like it'd be really fun to do artist retreats where we spend 4 days together and figure out our stories, like as artists, who we are, what we want to express. I feel like it only works in an in-person setting. So
I believe so too. Yeah, it's important to have, I'm a young artist from Calgary opera, and it's very important to have that in-person style. So I would look forward to working with the artists one-on-one for that too.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to do that and to travel across Canada and do that. I think it would be interesting to go to places like Whitehorse and experience.
We've seen the Matthias Complex. Against the Grain Theatre did such an amazing job. Joel Ibney's vision of creating this project was celebrated by the New York Times, and
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. The Wall Street Journal, all these places seeing this work being done. And it celebrated Whitehorse, it celebrated Iqaluit, and for artists to potentially, have the ability of working in these places or having companies that can celebrate Manitoba and celebrate Calgary and Edmonton and Banff and Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal and St. John's or wherever the Young Artist programs are located. Retreats are good ideas. I like this. Retreats and video on curtains. Lizzie, these are great ideas.
I think now the last conversation I had was with Joel Ivany, and we had the idea of doing Speaker's Corner.
Oh, I love Speaker's Corner. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, having a box in each opera house and symphony house, because it makes it less daunting. Because social media, when you say something about a show, you feel that you need to preface it with your expertise. Like, why would I have an opinion about this? Because there's a lot of elitism, regardless of how we talk about how that's gone. But obviously we don't want it there. And now we have these retreats, getting to know you and figuring out your story as an artist. I really think it could be fun, and also tell the story again of Canada and our places and our artists and our people. And it doesn't necessarily only have to be opera singers.
It can be musicians, it could be repetiteurs, it could be, oh my goodness, the list goes on. It could be coaches, it could be backstage staff, it could be costumes, it could be hair, it could be makeup, because as we all know, there's so much to do. Even like being in rehearsal last night in the Barge of Figaro with the COC that I'm singing in currently. It's incredible when you stop to think about just the amount of people who work to make the production. Everyone can be celebrated. Everyone wants to hear the story and the journey behind that. That's what makes it engaging. Besides just the aria on stage, there is so much to showcase. You could go through a Speaker's Corner from literally, even in a rehearsal process, there might be 80 to 100 people involved, from the pit all the way to the person at the stage door. Everybody has a story. I think that's exciting to see. Yeah.
All right. So we've got some work to do here at Opera Canada. we just brought on a grant writer. So
very cool. Congratulations.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to come on the podcast and talk about these things, and hopefully we'll be able to have another conversation soon once we figure out how to make these retreats happen.
That sounds like a fantastic idea. I'm excited to see what's going to happen coming up. We're at not a crossroads, but we're at a certain point, I think, where there's a lot of exciting possibilities we can head in, and as we've learned, anything can be done. It's possible to do it all. You can make amazing digital content and video and film. It's really an engaging, exciting time to be in media with opera.